Hello, everyone. Happy 4th. My name's Eric. Welcome into Above My Pay Grade. Thanks for coming on to the channel. If you're new here, please hit subscribe, share with friends and family. Hopefully this stuff is educational. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments below. Love interacting. And keep in mind, we're learning together, so I'm learning as I go as well. So if some of this stuff doesn't make sense, please ask. All right, today, the government wants to help you by spending more of your money. More likely, your grandkids' money. Because anytime you or I or the government uses money that they don't have, aka selling debt or bonds on the market, we are borrowing productivity from the future. You're borrowing productivity from the future. And if you save money, you're saving productivity from the past to spend in the future. And if you look at money that way, it makes a lot of sense. If you look at it the way that governments do, which is they can print their way to prosperity, then you get what we have today, inflation. A lot of people are wondering, is inflation here to stay? And no one has a crystal ball, including myself. There's a lot of talking heads out there that will give you very educated reasons as to why it's going to stay or why it's going to end. My opinion on that is probably going to stay for quite a while because the government needs it because we have so much debt and inflation helps them pay off their debt. But I want to talk about specifically the government making it worse because that's what they do. They like to make things worse. And if you're a person, and I know a lot of people like this, who back in 2020 said, we need this government stimulus. We need it. Well, that's true. We did. But why do we need it? Because we shut down the country. Why do we shut down the country? Because of the... Okay? So if you would have known that the cost of that was going to be rampant inflation, would you have made that trade? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But a lot of times what the government does, they sell you something. They say, hey, we're going to give you free college. Like the video I'm going to post at the end, Senator Raphael Warnock wants to give people $25,000 if they're first-generation home buyer. Now, that sounds great, doesn't it? Sounds great. Unfortunately, what that tends to do is raise housing prices by $25,000. Okay? Same thing with college. As soon as the government started backing student loans, guess what? Colleges became more expensive. Okay, so if there's easier access to money, the asset that people are buying with that money just goes up in price to match that more access with money. Unfortunately, politicians don't get this, and this causes inflation. The only thing we can do as voters is educate people. I would like to see, maybe after my time in the military, I love teaching, but I'd love to see this kind of education, economic education, be in schools again. Because unfortunately, Americans, and maybe this is by design, have no clue about finances, either personal or how government spending works. Okay, they're worried about making their monthly payment and all this kind of stuff, which some of it's self-induced, but a lot of it is lack of education. And so when they see that the government wants to give them money, they say, oh, great, this is fantastic. And they'll vote for said candidate. And then that candidate potentially gives them that money, like, Joe Biden said he's going to pay off student loans, and now that's down to $10,000 that he's going to pay off. And they vote for this free money, and then the cost of the things they're buying just doubles. Kind of sucks. And guess who gets hurt the most? The politicians who pretend to be bleeding heart, I care for you type of people. They don't. Okay, they don't. They just want to get reelected. The currency in Washington is power and control. So they just want to get reelected. But unfortunately, the people that don't have this economic education and understand that money or any unit of value, you can just say unit of value, which is, let's say, $1, that has to come from productivity. If it doesn't come from productivity, production of goods and services, then it devalues the other dollars that you have. every time, universally, okay? So if we're not getting money from production of goods and services and the government is just spending, I always ask people the most basic question: why do we pay taxes? If the government can print productivity, why do we pay taxes, right? So once you answer that question, you realize, oh, wait, they're just running this kind of Ponzi scheme, trying to keep this together with chewed up bubblegum and duct tape, but this doesn't actually work. And eventually the wheels fall off, and we get stuff like inflation, and people can't even afford a house. They're living in tents all over the place. And the problem is the government comes in and wants to help some more. And it was the government help in the first place that caused it, okay? So here's a good example of how politicians think, right? This is from President Biden's own Twitter page, okay? Did he write this? Probably not, but let's read it here. This is from July 2nd. My message to the companies running gas stations and setting prices at the pump is simple. We are in a time of war and global peril. Do you feel it? You feel the global peril? Bring down the price you are charging at the pump to reflect the cost you're paying for the product, and do it now. He's waving his wand. Okay. Bring down the price. Okay. Now, another basic question for people. Gas on average is $5 a gallon now. 2 years ago, let's just say it was $2.50. It was cheaper, right? Could gas stations have charged $5 a gallon back then? If the answer is yes, which it is, why weren't they? And you realize there's something called supply and demand. And they forecast things, right? So sometimes they can have good seasons and bad seasons. Sometimes for a whole year, they'll take a loss like they did in 2020. They took a massive loss because people weren't driving. Do governments just come in and pile money into their pocket? No, they took a massive loss, and they have to forecast those kind of things into their profit margin. But now there's a lack of supply and demand is still high. So the price reflects that. And politicians think they can just wave their wand and supply and demand, they don't even contemplate that. And one of my favorite economic quotes is, why do I always forget his name? Anyways, it'll come back to me. Thomas Sowell, there it is. Thomas Sowell says the first rule in economics is scarcity. Meaning, if everyone wants a pen and I'm the only one that has one, guess what happens to the price of this pen? It goes up, okay? If there's millions of pens and everyone wants a pen, there's competition. Because let's say monopolies form and I'm the only pen manufacturer, and I'm charging $100 per pen. Somebody sees that and goes, hey, wait a second. I can make pens for $10 or $1 or whatnot. And then that competition sucks market capital from me because no one wants to buy a $100 pen. And now the guy who's selling them for cheaper is getting the whole market share. Same thing happens with gas or oil. And politicians, this is the chickens coming home to roost. This is Keynesian Economics 101. They think government printing and declaring things and making the EPA and the SEC control everything and making business very hard to do and thousands of miles of red tape, which costs money too, to just get the product to the end consumer ends with economic prosperity. It just doesn't. It does not. And in this video with Raphael Warnock, who's a senator from Georgia, he is talking to Jerome Powell, and he's worried about the Atlanta housing market because people who are on the lower end on the income scale can't afford a house, which is something to be concerned about. But I don't think he understands, just listen, he doesn't understand why they can't afford a house. And he thinks the Federal Reserve's job is to make sure the housing market is equitable. He is also introducing legislation to make first-generation homebuyers get a grant from the government for $25,000 if they're a first-time homebuyer, because housing is so expensive. Now, methinks what's going to happen is if this passes and first-time homebuyers have access to $25,000, should I say first generation, their parents couldn't have owned a home or whatnot, to be able to qualify for this grant. So nobody in their immediate family could have owned a home before. But this first-generation homebuyers, they get access to this $25,000. Methinks that the price of homes are going to go up $25,000. Yes. So as the government injects capital or makes it easier, like colleges, the price just doubles. Okay? So if the government gives you easier access to capital for housing, that inflates the price of houses. Back to the scarcity argument. I hope at the end of the day, politicians are going to do what politicians do. Okay, but if the voters understand that government spending just digs us into the hole deeper and hurts the people on the margins the most, hurts the poorest among us, because if you can barely afford groceries and they go up 10% because of inflation, that sucks. That's catastrophic for you. So the people that pretend to care are making it worse. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have any questions for me? Hit me up in the comments. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Pay attention to this next video. Peace.
What is the Fed doing to prevent this rate increase from further exacerbating the housing crisis?
Well, so by raising rates, we're clear. What you're seeing is a slowing housing market now. You're seeing because of higher interest rates, mortgage rates have gone up pretty substantially, and you're seeing a slowing in the housing market. And that should mean, one of the things that should mean is that housing prices should stop going up at such remarkably rapid rates. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've had, a very, very hot housing market all around the country, and what should take place is, as demand moderates demand for housing moderates for new and existing homes, you should see prices stop going up quite so fast. You're also going to see fewer home sales and just generally a lower rate of activity in the housing market. So really, what needs to happen is housing supply and demand need to get back into better alignment, and the part of that we can control is really by moderating demand, so that prices stop going up quite so much, and that we can get back to a housing market where supply and demand are. Now, we don't control supply, and there are issues in this country around housing supply. It's harder to get land and lots and things like that. It's harder to get people to work. So there are supply side constraints. If you meet with builders from around the country, they will tell you that we have a longer term issue as a country around creating enough housing supply. That is not something that the Federal Reserve can do anything about, but it is an important issue.
Right. Notwithstanding that, mortgages are clearly, at least in the short term, are about to get more expensive. And it seems to me that what would be helpful is if the Congress would pass my Down Payment Toward Equity Act to help first-generation home buyers afford their first home. What effects do you expect the Fed's interest rate increases will have on let me put it this another way. The Federal Reserve helps enforce the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. What plans do you have to ensure that as interest rates increase, everyone still has access to a fair, reasonable price mortgage?
So the higher interest rates don't change our very important obligations under the fair credit laws that we enforce. And so we'll continue to enforce those, transparently and aggressively. It is true, though, that mortgage rates have gone up, and that will slow down demand, and that will be there's some pain involved in that for people paying higher mortgage rates, and also some people will be priced out of the mortgage market. But that is ultimately what needs to happen if we are to get back to price stability, to a place where people's wages aren't being eaten up by inflation. Right. So the greatest pain would be if we allow this high inflation to just continue.
I guess
will be right. Yeah.
Right, and I guess my point is that in the meantime, the folks who are on the margins of the marketplace in the first place, the issue is how do we protect them as much as possible. Related to that, when Secretary Yellen was here, she stated that the Federal Reserve needed to not only be skillful, but she said, quote, lucky to ensure, quote, a soft landing. I don't like counting on luck when the economic safety of Georgians, particularly those at the margins, is at risk, which is why I'm doing what I can here in the Senate. I've introduced a couple of bills to lower the price of gas, to lower the cost of groceries and other everyday goods, to cap the cost of insulin and other medication. And I've held the White